Good morning, my Mudfossil friends. Today, another outstanding, unbelievable bit of history unveiled by Carl Smith, who sent me something, and it relates to something that was sent to me by Peter Thorstensen. This is what education is a web of people really interested and communicating back and forth, not just spewing out, regurgitating things that were spoken of in the past. This is what Mudfossil University does. I'm going to show you something here going to really astounding. Now, I've been saying for quite some time how the pyramids are built from the top down using plateaus. And I will demonstrate this. I'll show some descriptions of how I believe it was done. And then we do know that the interior was a porphyritic limestone, totally different from the capstone, which is a marine limestone. It's a clear white limestone. And that was mined in an area not far from the pyramids, but they realized that stone came from this other area. Now, all of a sudden, this papyrus shows up. This guy discovered a few years back. This goes back to October 2015. Now, here's what it has to say. This guy says, following notes written by an English traveler in the early 19th century, two French pilots in the 50s made a stunning discovery. A set of 30 caves honeycombed into the limestone hills, but sealed up and hidden from view in a remote part of the Egyptian desert, a few miles inland from the Red Sea, far from any city, ancient or modern. During his first digging season, he established the caves had served as a kind of boat storage depot. During the fourth dynasty of the Old Kingdom, about 4,600 years ago. Then in 2013, during his third digging season, he came upon something quite unexpected, entire rolls of papyrus, some a few feet long and still relatively intact, written in hieroglyphics as well as hieratic, which is the cursive script the ancient Egyptians used for everyday communication. Talat, the guy that discovered these, realized he was dealing with the oldest known papyrus in the world. Now, astonishingly, the papyrus were written by men who participated in the building of the Great Pyramid, the tomb of Pharaoh Khafre, the first and largest of the three colossal pyramids at Giza, just outside Cairo, the Giza Plateau. Now, among the papyri was a journal of a previously unknown official named Merer, who led a crew of some 200 men traveled from one end of Egypt to the other, picking up and delivering goods of one kind or another, and this was his journal. Merer, who accounted for his time in half-day increments, mentioned stopping at Tura, a town along the Nile famous for its limestone quarry, filling his boat with stone and taking it up the Nile River to Giza. So he was south of the Nile, going up the Nile River to Giza. Now, in fact, Merer mentions reporting to the noble Ankaf, who was known to be the half-brother of Pharaoh Khufu, and now, for the first time, was definitively identified as overseeing some of the construction of the Great Pyramid. Now, it goes on about, it says, and since the pharaohs used the Tura limestone for the pyramid's outer casing, that's the outer casing only. Merer's journal chronicles the last known year of Khufu's reign, and entries provide a never-before-seen snapshot of the ancients putting finishes touches on the Great Pyramid. So this is a huge papyrus speaking of the constructions that they did and where the stone came from and how they moved it. And then Carl tells me this. All right, after the papyruses, apparently Carl's read these papyrus, I'm not sure of that, but he states that they built canals all the way to the pyramids, then filled them in afterwards. Case closed. All right, so thank you, Carl. Okay, after posting about the pyramids being built from the bottom up, Peter Thorstensen sent me this map that they were selling on a site, Antiquity Maps. And I don't know if that's the name of the site, but it is Babylon, Egypt. All right? And this goes back to the 1500s, sometime in the 1500s. And it's got all kinds of the captions on what's going on in every little area. Now, this is the direction. The Nile is flowing up this way. Okay, so they're looking at it in a different direction than we normally see maps nowadays. Normally they're presented always north at the top. Well, that's not the case here. So they're below down here in Egypt, and they're looking up towards the Mediterranean. And it's obvious, and if you go on Google Earth, you'll understand. But this is the direction. So what they did, the Nile runs this way. They dug this channel. It's a channel. And I'll bet you if you knew how to read this, it would say something about a channel from the Nilus running into the pyramids. There's all kinds of text about it, and I don't know how to read that stuff. So, and then I believe they filled it back in again. I think Carl's 100% right. Now, the thing that I was talking about, what I want to be sure people understood, these are not trees. Those are the feet from ancient giants, and I'm telling you that's a fact. Now apparently they didn't realize it either, but it's factually true, and I have presented chemistry, anatomy, biology, absolutely no question whatsoever what it is. It is not plant material whatsoever. They are tendinous limestone, porphyritic limestone from the tendons of feet from giants that were stuck in the mud during the Great Flood, and everything else eroded away and became the sands of the desert, the red sands of the desert, from the red clays and sands and silicon of the body when it erodes. And that is the weak flesh. That erodes, turns into mud and clays and sands and dirt and that kind of stuff. Then the tendon is a whole different issue. The tendon is limestone, and it is in your body. It's in a flexible form, and it has certain kaolin clays that work with it, and things that make it flexible during life. But as soon as you die, it becomes hard. Now, it'll stay soft in the ground. They used to be able to work this, and there's many cases, and I will show you one right now, of where they took these tendons and worked them into making walls and buildings. They did the same thing at the pyramids. All right, this is for the uninitiated, which I'm telling you right now, the only reason I show this is not pornography. It has nothing to do with spectacular, that kind of stuff. This is biology, and this is rock, and this is from a giant human woman that is solidified in the ground right now. If you see this tiny little separation right there, that tiny little crease goes completely down through, that is the abdominal seam. And what happens is when these creatures became waterlogged in the Great Flood, and then they dried out eventually after the flood subsided, that seam split, because that's a fascia held seam, and that is the crack right up in the middle of your whole entire abdomen that seals, and from the blastula, and that is just gigantic. And I'll show you there's plenty of these, and this is why, you say, oh, the guy says these are feet, and they're building these pyramids on feet, and he's just crazy. Well, no, I'm not crazy. I am correct, and I know the chemistry, I know the anatomy, I know the biology. I've done all the work, and I've had my giant specimens DNA certified 100%, anatomist certified 100%. I've had pieces of them CAT scanned. So there is no question that what the statements I'm saying are correct. And I will verify it by some more pictures right now. There's another one. There's a person standing way out there. That is that abdominal seam. I'm telling you, that's what these are, and there is no question about it. They are everywhere. Same seam. Biology. Okay, the only reason I show the female body parts are so that I can prove what I'm saying, because this is from the blastula, which is the ball that inverts and creates the seam, which creates your abdominal cavity. Once they waterlog, expand, and then dry out, that seam splits. Nobody carved those seams into rock. Nobody can do that. That's why I show that, and this proves that that is a biological part that has now become stone. All right, that was a giant's foot. These are the plateaus that they built these things from. What they did was, these are actually literally blocks. You can snap these right off of here, these little blocks. Those red and yellow and black colors, that is the colors of blood. The reason this water is running off at these exact places is because there's arterial pathways up there. Arteries open up. They are weak. Water blows right up through them. This is not runoff from rain. That is runoff from water that's coming up from the ground, being pushed up by water pressure that's in the ground. That's why they built all these things up on the top. They always had water sources. Every one of these has a hole running right down through the center. We're just finding these down in the pyramids of the sun down in South America, and Rainbow Serpent, all these tunnels and passageways. Those are the blood. Those are where arterial passageways ran through. You have to feed all these with blood. What they did was they took and they started knocking these things off and laying them down and made a pyramid-looking thing out of it, and then went up the river, or went down the river down to Tura, and loaded up all that limestone and floated it right back up through that canal up to these things. Then they had pulleys up at the top where when they dropped these big blocks down one side, it would lift up the limestone on the other side. It was not that hard to do this. And don't forget, this was flesh. They could just gouge these out with shovels. And they had handprints in here, footprints all in through there. Once they tapped in from the surface, which was the oxidized part of the stone, and they got down into the tender stone, they could do anything they want with it. That's why the inside of these pyramids is so nicely, smoothly worked, and all these areas. All they had to do was chisel them out and really just smooth them out, because they were soft stone at the time they excavated it. And this is even recently, I believe it was the Palace of Justice. I'm almost certain of that. In France, a couple hundred years ago, they were building it. And when they did, they mentioned the tender stone, how easy it was to work. And they talk about this in all the ancient texts. I mean, there's a lot of references to tender stone, soft stone. And you can see it everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere. They have handprints in them. Let me show you what they did with them. And somebody was here working with high-tech equipment. That is absolutely certain. Now, I've been displaying and showing and talking about soft stone and about the ancient creatures and petrified flesh and soft tissue that they worked. And here it is right here. There's no question. Absolutely zero question what happened here. No one can dispute this. They can only ignore this. There was a high-tech piece of equipment here that had wheels on it, and it had tracks on it that kept it from sinking into the soft flesh, which is the blood and the black and the red, and this is a tendon. And they cut slabs, and they took those slabs, and they put them up as walls. And this is in Puerto de Sampiata, Bolivia. And this right here is the tendon. And there's little red spots here and there you can see, which is the little bloody, they call it synovial sheathing and so forth. These are the slabs that they were cutting out. They moved them back here and put them on the walls. Now, occasionally they would hit a spot that had too much blood in it, or it was a piece of bone sticking through there, or connective tissue that did not have complete saturation of limestone. The tendons, the real strappy tendons, are almost pure limestone. They have they call them porphyritic limestone, because it has mineral inclusions and a little bit of red and blood and so forth in it. And I'll show you what happens when they cut the wrong slabs. All right, here's what happens when they cut the wrong stones and they make a mistake. This thing is going to fall apart. You see all these cracks? That's because there is, I believe this was either a bone or some type of an organ or whatever that had tissue in here that was weak and bloody, and because the more bloody it is, the weaker it is. That's just a fact. And you can see it. That's this one moved over to here. But you see it up here too. They have one up here that's very, very terrible. And they have another one up over here that's in terrible, terrible condition. They cut the wrong ones and they built this wall. Some sloppy guy did. They probably cut his head off or something for doing it. All right, this is how they all started out. These are the tendons, and this is a tendon. It's very, very, very strappy, and it is the same texture, and it has the same fibrils, and it has the same limestone. It's calcium carbonate, CaCO3, with a whole bunch of extra mineral inclusions in there that give it that strength and toughness to do that job of being a tendon. And they don't stretch a lot. There's only like a couple of percent stretch to those things. They're very, very strong, extremely strong. And they are separated well, here, let me show you something. All right, tendons have these fibrils, and these are the You see these hex fibrils? Well, they come all the way down to tiny, tiny, tiny little fibrils down here. But every single one of these fibrils is completely separated from every other one, so that they all can move like this against each other. It's an extremely exquisite system. And there you will find these red and yellow clays in here with these. Marine limestone, you do not find that. And plants, you do not find that. You do not find these fibrous hex fibers in plants. They don't go that way. They have cells. Plants have cell walls. We don't have cell walls. We have cell membranes. Of course, they have cell membranes too, but they have cell walls that work as their device that lets them twist back and forth by pumping up different cells to different pressures. It's called turgidity and flaccidity. And when it's flaccid, it falls down. There's no water in there. When it's turgid, it's stiff. So they can twist one side of the plant from one way and one side the other. That's how they bend, and they go to the light and do all that kind of stuff. So this is a whole different situation. If you got calcium carbonates with porphyritic limestone, and you can see those reds and little, oh well, let me show you that. Okay, this shows where the abrupt transition is. It comes down and wraps around the heel, and in the back, if you look at this carefully, you can see how nicely constructed this is. You see some comes out this way, some comes down this way, some comes over this way. It's a heel bone. I mean, these are what they call a calcaneus tendinous heel assembly. It wraps around the bone. I talked about the abrupt transition, and there it is right there. There's the abrupt transition. It gets wrinkly because it's under tension. When you cut it, it goes ding, and some of them absolutely makes perfect waves. I'll show you some very cool. You see this color? That's the color of kaolin clays and blood. The yellow, every one of these was sealed off. Like I said, they're all on their own separate when you're alive, so they can slide, and when you're dead they do the exact same thing. They keep everything separate. That's why all my mud fossils come out as complete body parts most of the time. A complete lung, fingers you find all the time, toes all the time. They are all separated by fascia. Okay, this is from Dream Time. And I want to make a statement about fair use. I'm a fair user. I'm trying not to make any money on this. I'm just commenting on what I see here. They put this up for people to see. This is what I want people to see and understand what's here. I don't want to care about making any money. I will never make any money on any of this stuff, trust me. This is the tendinous material when it breaks in a really, really exquisite way. You can see the break is up here. You can see that was what you at Devil's Tower, you got all this wrinkly, crackly looking stuff, but here, this one made this elegant little, and then it will go into that straightaways going below that. Very, very interesting the way. The conditions are key. It depends on where it was, how deep it was in the ground, how long the water lasted, how much solvomorphism it's called, how many solvents are in the water, what attaches to what eats away at what. It's a very complicated process, but I understand it very, very well now. I've created my own mud fossils. It is not that hard to do. Very, very simple process, and everything that I'm talking about is very, very simple. I'm a simple-minded person, and this is very simple. When you try to make everything complicated, this and that, and yada, 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 and you can make up any story you want, but when you look at the reality of it, it's extremely simple. Okay, Roger, Mudfossil University, the fairest of all fair users. Fair use disclaimer. At Mudfossil University, there is no profit, there's no money made, nobody gets paid, we all just learn. Now, Fair Use Act disclaimer. This site is for educational purposes only. Exclamation, exclamation. That means fair use, which says copyright disclaimer under Section 107 Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. None of this information should be removed or harassed in any way whatsoever. It is fair use.